Ya lo hace. Pierna derecha, directo al arco. ¡Golazo! ¡Golazo!
The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Tuesday, November 28th. December is getting quite close, Duane.
It is. December is a month that I didn't. All year I've been thinking about December because of what happens in December, and I'm not talking about the red man in the funny suit going down the chimney. I'm talking about the red team in the funny stadium, maybe going down to defeat again. I don't know. That's always what December is meant to me, and I can't believe we're this close to the end of the Major League Soccer season.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's always surprising to me, and you know, I cover Formula One and soccer and Major League Soccer specifically. That's the most things I cover, right? The two sports and two leagues I cover the most, and both like ends in the same like time period. And I'm like, wow, what am I going to do now with my 20 hours free of television watching?
Well, you've got Olympic preparation.
That's true, yeah. Oh, yeah.
Premier League, there's stuff that we'll make do.
But those
there's
seasons,
actually, the holidays.
Oh yeah, true, those holidays. But the season goes by quickly. Yes, it started in March. Technically, it starts like in January we start covering it. But it does go by pretty quickly, right? Every year, I'm surprised by how quickly a year can go by.
It's like they say this in England too, the same thing, and I find this kind of fun. Like we always start Major League season or Major League Soccer season, as you say, the draft is kind of where it starts to feel like the new season. You turn the page on the old one. Like there's that. The off season is really only about 6 weeks, and then you turn the page, and then the draft is on you very quickly, and you're like, wow, I have to talk about draft, and we have to start thinking about the roster moves and so on, and then preseason starts, and then boom, my God, CCL's kicked off, and TFC is going to be involved in CCL the next February as well, so that's going to make it even more in our face, and then oh my God, it's the season, and then it's cold, and then it goes from cold to mild to nice to hot to nice to mild to cold. It's like that's the cycle of life type thing.
That's where we're at right now this morning in cold, at least here in Montreal. Let's talk about a few roster personnel moves, questioning going on in Vancouver. What's happening with the Whitecaps?
Yeah, well, there's been starting with the player personnel moves. There's a couple there that jump out at you. They
well, first of all, Montero's gone. Like we didn't talk about it, but Freddie Montero said that. Thank you, Vancouver. Like, what, last week, 2 weeks ago? Like he's not coming back. Well,
it was a loan, and right, and they're just he'll look for another opportunity somewhere else, and Vancouver's going to have to replace that scoring. What I found interesting in the moves that they made yesterday was that they didn't extend Matthias Laba. Now, there was a time when not extending Laba would seem almost, blasphemous to the Whitecaps fans. Now, he hasn't been quite to the level that he was at maybe 2 years ago, but still certainly a bit surprising to see him not on that list. He was hurt this year too as well. Now, Kevin, I just because they didn't extend him doesn't mean he won't be back next year. You can always renegotiate these contracts, and in fact, that's quite common. It's just they don't want him back at the number that he would have been at with the club option that does exist in a standard MLS contract, which are usually always 2+1s, so they get a 2-year contract, and then there's a 1-year club option usually attached to those contracts, which includes the CBA mandated raise in there. So. Which I think is 5% off the top of my head. So what do you look at Laba's number on the list and add 5%, and that was what his salary would be. And the Whitecaps have said, no, we'd rather not have that next year.
Yeah, no. So on top of the Laba Montero move, apparently there's some front office's costs too, and apparently there's cost-cutting measures going on at a few different departments in the Whitecaps right now. It's kind of interesting to me to see this happen in Vancouver right now when, yes, Montreal Impact did cut costs in a certain type of situation, but they've decided to invest in a very competent coach, and we're talking about millions of dollars of investment in the coach and the coaching staff for the next few weeks and for the next few years for the duration of those contracts. So, yes, the Impact did try to save costs, and maybe Joey just realized that, maybe it won't work. Maybe if I try to save money, I'm actually going to lose more because nobody's going to come and see. Vancouver, I don't know. It seems like now there's a cost-cutting measure for reasons that are still too early to tell why. Is it costing money? Is it like trying to cut money in the front office to add on the field? That would be fun. That would be ideal. I doubt it's the case. It will be a situation to follow. Why are the Caps trying to cut money?
Yeah, well, look, and there's people in the front office have been laid off, and there's people in Vancouver asking questions, and in fact, people are reaching out to us to ask those questions of why are you laying these people off, as you say. Is it just simply cheapness? You combine also the USL team, going to the affiliate route rather than the full USL team again, as we talked about yesterday.
Is it all coincidence though? Like you see all cost-cutting measures in WFC2. You see front offices personnel being laid off and not renew their contract, and same for high-profile players with big money attached to them. Is it all a coincidence? I think it's more correlated than we can anticipate.
Well, what's the adage? If there's smoke, there's fire, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of smoke right now.
Yeah. Are they making business decisions that maybe they want to reduce costs so that they increase their profit margins? I would suspect, look, if they make, if they replace these front office staff with, I don't know, whatever. These aren't like high-end positions that we're talking about here. They're sort of just nickel and diamond stuff.
Duane, they're pivoting to video. That's why.
Yeah. Good God. Don't get me going on that again today. Yeah, if they make some, maybe they're going to build, improve infrastructure or something. Who knows? Like, they could be spending money down the line. Maybe they are saying, okay, well, we want to bring a big DP and we can't afford it on our current budget. So if we cut this, and this, which isn't ideal, but if we cut them, then we can redistribute that money into a player signing. Then that, it's the same amount of money going out, and they're taking sacrifices one place to add somewhere else and add somewhere that's going to be more visible on the field. That might be their approach, but the history of the Whitecaps has consistently been anti-big DP. That's sort of almost in their DNA at this point. So we'll wait and see on that. And I've been critical of that direction for a while now. I think it is the wrong direction to go in 2017 in Major League Soccer, MLS whatever .0 you want to call it. If that's what they're doing, then maybe that's good. Although I do feel obviously for the people that have lost their job here. But I'll believe it when I see it when it comes to the Whitecaps. To me, just this strikes me as corporate almost. It's the decision being made with the books in mind rather than the pitch in mind.
Yeah, that does make sense, and we'll see how it affects the fans, how it affects next year's roster. In December 12th, I think it is the expansion draft. We'll see how
almost immediately after MLS Cup, yeah.
Exactly. So we'll see how the Whitecaps turn around there too. Who they protect, who they leave open, and there's a strategy that I feel a few teams will do this year in the expansion draft. It's a little early to talk about this, but you leave a bait one. Like you pinpoint one of your roster that you might not want back, or you might not want to sign long term, but that has some value, especially for an expansion team. If you have one of those players that his salary might be a little too high for your liking, well, you leave him unprotected. And the fact that they're going to take him maybe leaves you with maybe gambles that you can unprotect players that you might want to keep, but because you leave a bait out there. I don't know. There's a lot of strategies and a lot of things you can prepare before an expansion draft if you're kind of crafty.
Yeah, I have a feeling that LAFC is going to approach this expansion draft much in the same way that Atlanta did last year, in the sense that they'll be.
Go ahead, sorry.
Yeah, well, they'll be looking to make deals, and there'll be players that are exposed that will go, and then they'll get drafted and then immediately traded back, just like we saw with Atlanta last year. So it's going to be a chess game. I hate the damn expansion draft. It's so not needed.
You have to get used to it. There's going to be 4 or 5 more in the next 3 to 4 years.
They're addicted to their North American ways. They truly are. They just can't.
Hey, numbers don't lie, Duane. Numbers don't lie. At least if you remember last year when the Las Vegas Golden Knight in hockey had that expansion draft on TV,
yeah,
the ratings were pretty high. Like, a lot of people tuned in. People tune into those type of things. So as long as people tune in, we're going to keep having some.
Speaking of the, sort of get your bingo card out here, real quickly. We don't have hockey shows. Just get this out there. I heard a very interesting theory on why the Las Vegas Golden Knights are doing so well at the start of the NHL season. It's that they're an expansion team, so their current record at home is 9-1, and the theory in the NHL circles is that people are going in and going, "Hey, Vegas, baby!"
You know what the theory is? It's an expansion team, so the odds of them winning are pretty low. So it's kind of easy money. So you're Vegas, betting on the Golden Knights, you're making money. People are going to go in the stands, and down the road, the house is going to win once again.
Yeah, they'll crank it up. I suspect they might slip back in the path, but that's not our expertise, so we'll leave that alone now.
Exactly, but let's go back to soccer.
Yeah, look, when it comes to the Whitecaps, they are at a crossroads, I think, right now. And we talked a lot about last year and, how sort of the West was weak, which I think hid a lot of flaws on that team. And they were exposed greatly in that Seattle series, I believe. In particular, the lack of punctuality. What am I talking about? The lack of
finish.
Scoring ability. Finishing, yeah, I'm overtired here.
You're talking like you were thinking of the point at the end of a phrase, which is like the end, which is like finishing.
Yeah, punctuation. Yes,
yeah,
not
true.
Punctuality in their attack. So at any rate, so they are at a crossroads, and we'll wait and see on this. But some ominous sights there. And if you're out there thinking that they're going to get rid of Carl Robinson, I think that these moves sort of, to me, almost ironically suggest that's not likely to happen. They're making, what I mean by ironically is they're firing people. So you'd think, oh, well, that would mean they might fire him. But no. Carl Robinson is not an expensive manager, right? It's his first position. He has like a sort of investment in the club there in terms of his emotional investment. I mean, he's been there a while now. They get him fairly cheaply, and it sort of fits the overall mentality. And that's, Carl Robinson finished 5th in the Coach of the Year ballots, which I found kind of interesting. So, and he had a pretty high. I think he was 3rd in terms of like player votes. So that's an interesting sort of insight into Carl Robinson and what kind of player, what kind of manager he is to the players. But I don't think he's going anywhere pretty clearly.
No, exactly. Let's take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll talk about Cincinnati.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
Soccer Today. Duane Rollins with myself, Kevin Laramee. FC Cincinnati's approval, at least the expenditure, the spending by the city on the stadium has been approved.
Yeah, the votes were 5-2 to 1, so 5 votes for, 2 votes against, and 1 abstained vote in there. So that's good. They got the required amount of votes. It's good if you're a stadium proponent there. And I am not black and white when it comes to public spending on stadiums, which puts me in the minority, because there's either zealots that want stadiums everywhere, or zealots that think that there shouldn't be a penny spent on any public infrastructure at all. And I think maybe the truth lies down the middle. But this clearly is good news for them. And if you go to 5 Rings, you'll learn a term we use, which is called soft benefits, all the time. And that means that it's not measurable in money, but it's measurable in sort of spirit and emotional attachment and community engagement and things like that. So
like a sense of belonging, like a supporters club and a soccer team can bring to a city itself.
Yeah, which is not without value. It is just not measurable. And the mistake that ownership groups make all the time is they try to attach financial values to stadiums, generally speaking, the money that they're putting on these stadiums, like it's going to bring in $60 zillion and money to the community. It's usually they're pulling it out of their elbow, and generally speaking, that makes it all look bad. And they should stop talking about that and say, you know what, this probably is going to be a break-even proposition at best, but it's going to help the spirit of the community and make people.
How you took the words out of my mouth. I was gonna say, it's gonna cost us money. We're gonna pay for it, but in the long run, we're gonna be happier living here. Are you taking this deal? I would say yes.
there you go. If they said that, I think probably more stadiums get passed.
Yeah,
Alas,
like, okay, fine. We're going to have to pay, but our kids will be happier? Sure.
Yeah, we have to spend money on something. It's just what we want to spend it on. That's what it comes down to.
That or maybe a tax credit for the rich. What do you think? All right, let's build stadiums.
Exactly. At least the public gets used to them. Look, I think that this is increasingly becoming pretty clear who's going to win this expansion race. I think Cincinnati and Nashville out of left field. And I love the fact I'm really excited about this Nashville build now, the closer it gets to reality. So I believe that you're probably going to see they might even reward 3 at once and then can extend the bidding for that 4th spot for another year or so. It wouldn't shock me at all if that's what they did, if they came in on, they're making this announcement probably in December sometime, so soon, and they say, okay, it's Cincinnati, it's Nashville, it's Sacramento, maybe Sacramento, unless my Rochester theory comes true, but all signs point to they will probably get the nod. And then they'll say, Sacramento comes in 21, Cincinnati comes in 22, and whatever they make, it's probably would be that order too, because Nashville has the most work to do and Sacramento has the least amount of work to do. So you put Cincinnati somewhere in the middle. They have to develop an MLS infrastructure, but this didn't get the stadium going. But all that sort of stuff, I think that's probably how we'll see this play out. Now the other thing, I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on Cincinnati, Kevin? We talked a lot about the expansion process in the days past.
Ohio needs a team. And it looks like Columbus not going to be there anymore in the near future. So Cincinnati makes sense.
Yeah, and that's the other pice of news.
It's a shame, though. It should be a rivalry. Like you shouldn't take a team away. You should add teams. I don't know.
Everything about the Crew situation is cynical beyond words, and it's just they don't care. Like the MLS just does not care. They believe. And they're probably right about this too. To be honest, is they believe that there will be a pushback. They're seeing the pushback right now, and they're probably taken a bit aback by it. But I think they believe that, and they understand that the pushback will dissipate once the decision is made. There'll be an outroar. There will be, they will lose fans forever in Columbus. There will be, probably 4,000 or 5,000 people that will, burn their MLS jerseys and will never spend a penny on the league again. Just like I have never, even after a lifetime of supporting the Ontario Hockey League, I have not spent a penny on the Ontario Hockey League since they stole my team. Do you think that matters to the Ontario Hockey League? No, it doesn't.
Like
because
who? What?
Yeah, exactly. Me and the 500 or 1,000 other people that are doing the same thing don't matter to them, and this is going to be sadly the same thing in Columbus. I don't like it. I have explained before why I think it's bad business move to do it, because it erodes the social contract, the trust that fans have and have to invest in the league to make it matter. And eventually, if you do it enough times, it stops mattering. But
what if, Duane, even like Columbus moves to Austin, and then the expansion side of MLS says, Columbus, you know what? If you want a team, you can have one. Give us $150 million. We're gonna give you one.
Yeah, that's the cynical.
So is that the ultimate re-gift? Like, so you give something to someone, you take it back, and you ask them to give you a bunch of money to have it back.
Well, it's if we take our skepticism hat off, our anger hat off on the hashtag Save the Crew stuff, and look at this purely from a business perspective for a second here, and what that says, that they told this grassroots group, that if they wanted an expansion team, they were free to bid for one. What this says is how much this league has grown since 2007, because in 2007 or 2006, I should say, pardon me, I'm trying to get my dates right here. It's been, it all blurs after a while, but when they moved the Earthquakes to Houston is what I'm getting at. They basically at the time said, don't worry, we're going to get you a team back. We're just going to find an ownership group. We're going to stabilize this. We're going to, take the franchise and get them playing in this community that we want into. And they worked towards that. And 3 years later, I believe it was 3 years later anyway. I'd have to look it up to be sure, but they had the Earthquakes came back, and there was never a doubt that they were going to. And they, even said you're going to keep your records, like your MLS Cups that you won in San Jose will stay with the San Jose Earthquakes. They won't move to Houston with those things. That like your club records will all remain the same in our record books and all that sort of stuff. They worked with this community to make sure that they kept them in the fold, and I think that spoke to where MLS was at the time, and the fact that they understood that they couldn't afford to alienate markets, they couldn't afford to alienate fans. Now they feel, they're full of piss and vinegar and they don't care. They're just going to go, this looks like the grass is greener here. Although, for the life of me, I don't understand why they think the grass is greener in Austin, Texas. But that's...
It's not. There's the sun. Yeah. It's like a little yellower because it's Austin. It's a little too much sun. It's too hot. I don't know. I don't like it.
Don't get it. Yeah,
I don't like it.
It's just the stupidest. Perhaps I'm trying to think in the history of like moves. Maybe moving the Winnipeg Jets to Phoenix might be in the same line of stupidity if you look at all the problems that, how successful Winnipeg is as a market in the NHL versus how awful Phoenix is for a market in the NHL. Maybe that one might be in line, but it's hard to remember.
I wonder if in the last Columbus game last week, if hot dogs were on wrappers that said Albuquerque Isotopes on them.
Yeah.
It looks like that sort of situation where the people learn of an impending move. Oh, no, we don't want to lose our team. And save this, save that, save the crew, save the Isotopes of Springfield. But the deal's already done. They're already going to Albuquerque. And that's why you have some Tex-Mex flavoring on your hot dog.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he registered the websites and the trademark registrations. They're all like this stuff's been going on for months, and it's just cynical beyond words. And in fact, I remember having conversations about the possibility of them moving this team to Austin, Texas when he bought the team. When Precourt bought the team, that was 4 years ago now, and
it was in the fine print. It said you cannot leave the team unless you leave the town to go to Austin. It's like, you cannot move unless you move.
Yeah. I mean, look, I hate it. I think it's ridiculous. And I don't, where I differ from a lot of people's opinions, I don't think it says anything about development or anything like that. I mean, there's people out there that are convinced that this is why the U.S. isn't going to the World Cup is because Columbus can move to Austin. Some bizarre connect the dots there, if you ask me. But nonetheless, you'll hear stuff like that articulated. I don't think it has anything to do with it, but I do think it is just, it's just cynical. It's just so callous and dangerous, I think, on a long-term play in terms of eroding the confidence of sports fans and sports leagues at any rate. Speaking of development, Kevin, I want to have a bit of a conversation about the LA Galaxy and their academy. There was a good conversation on Reddit and on Twitter yesterday about this. The LA Galaxy essentially cut like pretty much all of their homegrown players yesterday. And if you look at the Galaxy, which have always been held up as this like great pool of academy talent, they've had success at the U.S. Like the youth levels. I'm trying to get the acronym in my head. There's too many soccer acronyms out there.
Yeah.
U.S. development.
USDA.
Development. Yeah. Thanks. Whatever that league is. Anyway, they do very well there. They even did very well in the first year of the USL partnership with the LA2. So this is something that people have held up, but yet they have not converted any of these players into consistent starters at the Major League Soccer level. Now, part of this, I think, has to do with the philosophy of the LA Galaxy over those years to bring in big talent and to prioritize veterans over youth consistently, and that was Bruce Arena's way. And it sort of stayed the same last year in the lost season. Sigi Schmidt doesn't really have a great history of playing kids too either, so I don't think that's much is going to change there. But it does sort of beg a question. If you look at the overall history right now of the homegrown rule, we talked about the where the status of the USL partnership was yesterday. So it's, might as well talk about the status of the homegrown rule right now. Are we producing enough players? I use the royal we there in terms of the league. Is MLS producing enough players at the development level, at the homegrown level, that are having an input?
No. I don't think they are. I don't know if it was a rhetorical question, but I'm going to answer it. If you're looking at the Galaxy, you know what it looked like? It looked like you just chop off the top of the pyramid so that young players can just take that spot. It's just like you're saying, all right, we don't have a spot now. Let's just gain ourselves 2 years. Let's chop the top of the pyramid. And we're going to have a 2-year buffer, and then the kids will be ready. And if not, we're just going to chop it off in the next 2 years too. And it's basically making space for other academy products. And it's given up on a few chances. It's given up on maybe a late bloomer in that bunch of players that were let go. But I think it's, in a way, indicative of the lack of, like, even with the USL teams, there's something missing. Not that there's something missing, but there's that little gap. You know, the best example for me is Jack McBean for LA. It was always close. I remember when McGee was the MVP of this league and got traded in that year from LA to. We're all saying, McBean's going to be the next McGee, and we're all thinking, look, McBean's going to be good, and then we see flashes, and then the LA dose starts, and he goes back down, and we just don't see him, and sometimes he's back on the bench for Galaxy and gets a few playing minutes, a start here and there, but then just doesn't continue. I think it's the best way to explain it. Players still come with a little something missing, and if it's not individual case of talented players a la Yedlin or other players like this, well, they usually dwindled out after 3-4 years and not necessarily have that staying power. It's been a long time, at least from my perspective, because we haven't seen one in Montreal, really, an academy product that's come and it becomes a starting 11 and stays there all the time. It's difficult. There's something missing about the player development at that top. I think where it's missing is between being a reserve player and being a starter. That's where the gap is.
No, precisely. Look, you say there is something missing. I'll tell you exactly what it is. It's first team minute opportunities. MLS, you know, the irony of all these people that claim that MLS, there's no pressure to win, there's a lot of things they're ignoring. And one of the things they're ignoring is there is pressure to win. And one of the ways that manifests itself is in the fact that they won't play kids, these managers, because they fear that if they do and they lose jobs because of it, they will put their own job at risk, right? Or even just, they may just lose, and managers don't like to lose. We've seen, some programs like Dallas have some success with their homegrown players, and then they slip back this year, and it's hard, to put an exact finger on why. There's some theories out there. Look, overall, I agree with you. They're not doing enough. There are some pockets of success out there. Dallas, I mentioned, despite their slip back this year, I think you still have to view that as a pretty fundamental success there. The Red Bulls are using academy players very well, and I think that they've set themselves up to be quite competitive for years on end because of their ability to produce academy talents there. I think TFC deserves some credit, as do the Whitecaps to a certain extent. I think just because they have managed to produce a lot of players that have done well at the USL level, and they haven't really broken through yet, but I think there's still some hope there. There's others. Salt Lake, you got to give them credit too for what they're doing. But look, overall, it's not quite there. Now, look, we do need to be somewhat careful, though. Even the best academies in the world don't produce, multiple stars every year. That's a misnomer. But they do produce multiple players that play professionally each year. That's also, I think, we let ourselves off too easily when they say, oh, look, the Manchester United Academy only produces like one starter every 4 years for the first team. Well, that's true, but they also produce like 12 guys. Notice I used United there, so I'm trying to show I'm not biased. They produce 12, 13 players that are going to play for like League One teams or what have you. And the academies aren't necessarily even doing that. They're just cutting these players adrift, and their careers are fizzling. Some of them luck out and find USL teams, but by and large, these guys are struggling.
Yeah, I agree. But I'll take an example just to be devil's advocate, or just to maybe illustrate what you're saying and maybe put things in perspective. Yeah, it takes a lot of work by the players themselves after they get let go by their main academy. So, example, FC Montreal. The FC Montreal alumni now, there's about 6 or 7 that are playing professionally right now across the world of soccer. And there's some that are playing in Europe, in Scandinavia. There's some that are playing in the USL, in the Master Cacher in Colorado Spring. We have Alessandro Regi with the Phoenix Rising. And you have other example too. There's you have Mele Temgua and James Jeffrard, and you have other players like Zachary Sokunda and Yann Filion who are playing in Scandinavia. So you're right. It's not just about sometimes what MLS Academy's product is. Are they producing soccer players? And maybe they are more than we anticipate, but we just wish we could see them in MLS maybe more. I mean, maybe that's where you're absolutely right, where first team minutes, put them in the trial by fire might be missing. And sometimes trial by fire and confidence needs to be given during that trial by fire, saying, look, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to get burned. You're going to get scored on if you're a keeper. You're going to be exposed if you're a defender. You're going to miss a sitter if you're a forward. But not because you did any of those things am I going to cut your minutes too quickly. I'm going to still give you maybe a few more minutes to expose yourselves truly to maybe help me make my decision for or against in the future. But I need to give you that playing time to be evaluated properly, at least in my opinion.
Well, Major League Soccer is a league that's ripe to do that because it is forgiving. I mean, Seattle won the MLS Cup last year. They were in last overall or some damn thing in July, right? So it's a league that you can recover from. I mean, it's becoming harder to do that, but it's still not impossible as long as they're going to allow 50% of the damn teams in the playoffs. And, they're probably going to expand it to 16 before they go lower. So that's not good.
MLS Cup will be in January.
Anyway, they're going to 16, right? Like, we all understand that. Alas, it's the point I'm making is there's an opportunity to do that. I'm going to have to refresh my memory of the rules in terms of these players once they've been released, whether they're eligible to sign other MLS contracts or whether these clubs maintain their rights. I know in the past that they maintained their rights. I know there were some changes to make that a little more flexible for released players in the last CBA, and I'm going to have to go read it again before I comment with any authority. But some of these players that, for instance, LA released yesterday, I think that if another team had there are other teams that could have a look at them. In fact, I look at a guy like Villarreal, Jose Villarreal, who's a player that got a lot of people excited a few years ago, has never really. He's gotten very few opportunities and hasn't, in fairness to the Galaxy, hasn't really grabbed a hold of the opportunities he's been given. But I still look at a player like that who has a lot of flair and, is kind of an exciting player.
He was hot in 2013. I remember that. Remember Villarreal for the Galaxy. I remember talking about him during my off Dudeworks early days, trying to hype up home games and talk about the opponents. I remember talking about Villarreal as a danger for the Galaxy. That's a long time ago, though.
Yeah, he has some goals. He's done some things. You look at him and you think, well, wouldn't it be in MLS's best interest to keep a young player? It's the type of player they want to keep in. He's Mexican American and all that sort of jazz. He's the type of player they'd want. Wouldn't it be helpful to keep him in the league? In fact, it might be helpful to keep him in the city. There is another team starting there next year. So I don't know what the eligibility rules are on that. I'll refresh myself on that after I'm done the show today. But I think on that note, Kevin, I am going to. I think I've exhausted my opinion on this one. Unless you have any final thoughts on the day.
No, my final thoughts on the day are for Asun Camara, former Montreal Impact players for years, been with the club back in the NASL days. In 2011, has been one of the few that made the transition and stayed with the Montreal Impact since day one in Major League Soccer. Up until today at 1 p.m. this afternoon, Asun Kumar is having a press conference with the Montreal Impact to talk about his future. And a few weeks ago, according to Vincent Détouche of 98.5, of TVA Sport, sometimes he's on 98.5 FM as well, but Vincent Détouche mentioned that Asun Kumar will retire due to concussion and repeated concussion during his career and wanted to have a healthy post-career. So all the best to Asun Kumara. Thank you for those great moments. And I will always remember, just go on our YouTube page and Facebook Live archives. Me and Tristan Amour doing our post-game video in the stands with our microphone, and I'm holding the camera and the mic. And lo and behold, a drop-in, a run-in by Asun Kumara after a win to talk about the win with us in the stands. Not premeditated, just there, premeditated. I got it. Just there talking about the game and showing us, I took this moment as in thank you for talking about this sport, and the fact that he sat down and talked to us. It was one of the highlights of my broadcasting career, just being there live on the air and having a player that I always looked up to. And who's going to forget as well in 2013, the moment in Vancouver where the Impact are losing. It's 2-1. It's like, geez, we were winning, and now we need another goal to get the Voyageurs Cup. It's the 87th minute. There's a corner, and there's a ball, and Asun Kumara jumps in the air, hits the ball with his head, scores, and makes a beautiful run right in front of the supporters' banner saying, Je me souviens. I remember. Well, guess what? Je me souviens. Asun Kumara.
Fair enough. For our non-French speaking listeners, that is a reference to both Quebec's license plate and to the fact that the Vancouver Whitecaps are still bitter that the Impact lost to TFC 6-1.
I know.
The Glacier Cup.
Yep, exactly. So thank you, Essen. See you soon.
All right. Certainly, real quickly on that, from my perspective, a name and a player absolutely synonymous with the Impact. The Derby, whatever you want to call it, Two Solitudes 401, the St. Lawrence Seaway, whatever Derby you want to call it, will not quite be the same next year. A lot of old names won't be part of it anymore. Kevin, on that note, as always, say goodbye.
You can follow Duane on Twitter at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. Until tomorrow, as always, don't miss. The playoffs are back, Duane. Playoffs are back. Playoffs are back tonight. Oh, dear. And until tomorrow, have a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.